thank you guys. Very happy to be here again and giving another talk at Afikra. Today, be forwarding an article titled "Working with Arabic in UX Design," which was published in an online blog called prototyper.io. A little bit about why I chose the article. I've worked in sort of software development for a while now. I'm not a UX designer, but I've worked with a lot of them, and I've launched a lot of digital products that are bilingual, both English and Arabic. And the idea of designing digital experiences in Arabic reminds me of when the printing press arrived in the Arab world, like in the early 20th century, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And some of the challenges around the complexity of the language and like standardizing it for, for print, for newspapers, is a similar sort of process that's happening in UX. And it's very fascinating to kind of learn about. This article was published by an author. The author's name is H. Locke, who is the head of UX at Ogilvy UK, which is a design agency, and they do a lot of sort of designs for apps and such. And I linked the article for you guys. Before we start, just in case not everyone in the audience knows what UX design is, I thought I'd just call out a definition. This definition comes from the Nielsen-Norman Group, which is a UX research agency and consultancy. They say that user experience design encompasses all aspects of the end user's interaction with a company, its services, and its products. Today, I'm mostly focusing on sort of the very narrow part where humans interact with softwares, mobile apps through a screen, whether it's desktop, mobile app, or anything like that. So mainly the big challenge that comes from designing digital experiences in Arabic comes from the fact that Arabic is a right-to-left language versus the left-to-right. Which most Latin languages are. And so one would think that you would have to flip language, but there are a lot more layers of complexity around that. What the author argues is that native Arabic speakers actually also think about progress and visualize progress and sort of completion in an opposite way than native Latin language speakers who are left to right. And so when you think about things like sliders, showing progress bars or completion in a sort of mobile app or some sort of digital experience, in Arabic, you'll see that it goes from right to left, as you can see sort of in the example here, versus left to right in sort of English or another one. But then adding another layer of complexity, radial directionality is the same. Clockwise is the same in Arabic and English, and anti-clockwise is the same in Arabic and English. So if you want to visually represent the time without writing it down, like you can see the little icon here, it shows a 5 p.m., you don't need to flip those icons. And if you do, then it doesn't really make any sense. And then you have some sort of arbitrary visual representations that it doesn't really matter if you do, and you sort of can take a choice on whether to do it or not. And I think the author, argues that this coffee mug, the handle should stay on the right, both sides, but it doesn't really matter. So this sort of adds, when designers have to design all their different elements, they have to sort of think about what gets flipped and what doesn't get flipped. And in general, everything to do with navigation and movement and menus gets flipped. And that's really interesting for me as well, because being someone who's like completely bilingual and maybe even a little more comfortable with English, if I'm looking and interacting with for example, a mobile app that's in Arabic, I don't want the menu button to flip to the other side. That just throws me off completely. I still think about progress from left to right, like a native English speaker. I just want to read the language in Arabic. And so it can be a little jarring as well. To add even more complexity, even though Arabic is a right to left language, we read our numbers left to right. And so that creates all sorts of weird like idiosyncrasies in alignment. So usually when you're thinking about English and you're aligning all your text to the left, your eyes naturally, as you read, you go from top to bottom of the screen or the page. Your eyes will always start a sentence or a line at the left side, and then you read. And the same thing happens in Arabic when you're reading words, but when you read numbers, your eyes have to jump to the left, read the number, and then jump back and continue to the right. And when you look at alignment, as you can see sort of in the screenshot here, the phone number 555-1000-1000 is right aligned, but you read it starting sort of center left of the screen. And that can also kind of feel a little odd when you're comparing it to its sort of English counterpart. And that's just another interesting little example of kind of like the layer of complexity with Arabic languages on digital screens. And on a very sort of side note, this made me actually think that when we vocalize or vocalize Arabic numbers in our mind, you can actually vocalize them right to left, left to right, or a mix of the both, depending on the actual number. So, for example, 123 would be written 1, 2, 3. But if you say it in Arabic, 123, you say 1 and 3 and 20, just because, for fun. And in keeping with the language, Arabic is a visually more complex language. We have a lot of dots and diacritics that are really sort of important to understanding. And that sort of requires a lot more vertical space to be able to show it clearly, especially if you're designing with accessibility needs in mind, which a lot of app developers do nowadays if you need bigger fonts so people with weaker eyesight can read it. And so that sort of really limits how much information you can fit in a single screen. And especially when you're designing for bilingual experiences, you have to sort of take that into account when you're maybe starting in English and then adapting your designs to Arabic. On top of that, Arabic doesn't really translate very well one-on-one from English. And so things that might appear shorter in English take much bigger spaces in Arabic. And in the example you see the view cart button. The label view cart in English takes a lot less space than the tafasil arabat al-tasawwuq, which is very long. Excuse me butchering the actual label. But yeah, so usually what designers do is they'll start in English, kind of leave a lot of empty space, and then hopefully when they flip it and they get the content in Arabic, that sort of fits nicely. But there is a little bit of calibration that needs to happen. And it can be a little challenging as well. I'll leave you with a last point where we talk a little bit about maybe not some of the challenges, but some of a way that's trying to address some of these challenges. And I want to talk about Noto, which is a family of fonts that's free and accessible to anyone to use. You don't have to pay a license for it. It was commissioned by Google, and it was really a way to try to collect and standardize 93 scripts so far. They keep adding more and more to it. Noto stands for no more tofu, and in the sort of tech world, a tofu is this little box you see right here that sort of is a default representation of a letter that you can't see because the computer doesn't support that language or that script. You won't see them that much anymore, but if you remember Windows 95 or something, and you sort of like try to write in a language that's not in the Latin script, whether it's like Arabic or in the acrylic script or something like that, you would see these representations. And what Noto tries to do is it tries to visually standardize languages. So it uses the same sort of like arches and strokes and thicknesses of lines. But also, more importantly, it tries to standardize the height of all the letters across all these different languages and scripts. And it does that in a way to help assist designers and developers to be able to at least not have to think so much of when they're designing the information hierarchy from sort of like the top down. And as an example, I put a little phrase both in English and in Arabic, Halab al-Khamis or Hello Thursday. I'm using the same font size and the same thickness of font to show that there is a little bit of visual similarities and comparisons between Noto even though they're two languages with two completely different scripts. If you'd like to learn more, I dropped a bunch of different links into this slide, and those links are also referenced in the original article, so you can always go there and find them at the bottom. And yeah, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed it.